Hey, good afternoon. How's it going? Can you guys hear me all right?
Carlo, can you promote me to co-host?
Yeah, that's done. Can you hear me okay, Lynn? Thanks.
Testing, testing.
I believe we're still missing a few members, so we're just going to give them a minute to join.
How's everyone doing? I just got back from walking Serena, our dog, and it's an incredible day.
A little windy.
A bit.
They don't let us out much, David, so we haven't been outside too much today. We're envious.
I understand.
Hey, you've been there, right?
Oh, yes.
All right, everyone, why don't we get the meeting started here? We still have a few members that are absent, but we'll get started. So since we don't have a chair yet, we will be doing that a little bit later as part of the meeting. I'm going to call the meeting to order at 4:03 p.m. This is a special meeting of the La Mesa Library Task Force. I'm going to ask for a volunteer to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Harris, would you like to lead us?
Yes, yes, I would.
Very good, thank you.
Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of
of
America
America and to
and
the
to the
republic
republic for which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much.
Carlo, real quick, can we do roll call?
We will, yeah. I was just going to do that, and we're going to take roll. So let me just go here in order. Task Force member Chenoweth Moyer.
Here.
Task Force Member Duggan. I see that you're here. I don't hear you, but you're present. Task Force Member Harris,
Here.
Task Force Member Moore, Task Force Member Navarro, Task Force Member Schmitz,
Here.
and Task Force Member Wilcox.
Here.
Very good. All right, so next is additions or deletions to the agenda. We don't have any changes to the agenda at this time, so I'm going to move on to public comment. And I believe that we may have one member of the public who I'm allowing to speak. So Councilmember Parent, you are live. So please go ahead and make your public comment.
Thanks very much, Carlo, and hello, everyone. Colin Parent, I'm on the City Council. Thank you for your service on this task force. I just wanted to pop in today and just share with you that a couple weeks ago, I got a text from Supervisor Nathan Fletcher's office saying that he had some time available in his schedule later that day and wanted to do a tour of La Mesa because La Mesa is going to be a part of the new district that he represents. And so I was able to move some things around and meet up with him and give him a little bit of a tour of the city. Before I did that, actually, I checked in with Greg Mora, who just to kind of see what he's our city manager, sort of what he suggested I talked to him about. He reminded me that that we've had some conversations in the past with the county related to the library. And so I thought, hey, that's a great idea. And so one of the places I brought him was the library and shared with him that this task force had been formed, just a little bit of background about the history of the city and the county related to the potential expansion of the library, and suggested maybe some opportunity for the county to be involved in expanding library space in the future. It was pretty quick. I mean, it was just a couple hours that we had him in La Mesa. We got him to come and meet up with Carlo and the city manager and city staff as well right after that. But anyway, so all I need to say is he certainly sounded receptive to some further conversations about doing it. Hopefully, if we have the positive ear of the supervisor, we can make some more progress for the county related to this issue than we've had in the past. But I did want to make sure just to share with everyone here that I have had that conversation. I want to make sure that you all know that that happened and not that that we're no decisions are being made absent your input. But hopefully, I did want to just sort of share that I've tried to tee it up, and hopefully we can that can be the beginning of more fruitful dialogue with the county going forward. And I'm going to stick around for another 20 minutes if you guys want to talk in the future on the other stuff. But I do have a work engagement that I have to be at 5. But just wanted to share that with you, and looking forward to seeing the work product from this task force in the future.
I have a question. It's appropriate to address Mr. Parent directly without violating the Brown Act. In the past, in my capacity as president of the Friends, I've met with Supervisors Jacob and Anderson as at that time our representative on the board. I wouldn't mind having a meeting of some kind with Mr. Fletcher. When I met with Anderson, it was really with his staff. Colin, is there somebody, a phone number that you would direct me to set up such a meeting?
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly share with anyone the phone number for the supervisor's office. And I should just mention too, I don't know if anyone joined, but I did share that your agenda materials with the supervisor's office today. So there may be someone on staff who's also a participant or attendee here. But I'll shoot off their the office phone number to you, so you can call them and make
okay.
a comment.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
We do have a request to speak from a member of Chair Fletcher's office. I believe we have Paola Martinez Montez. I'm going to allow you to speak now if you wish to make a brief public comment.
Yeah, so I just, good evening, everybody. Paola Martinez Montes here, gender pronoun she, hers. I'm the Director of Community Engagement and Senior Advisor for the supervisor. So I'm happy to follow up with you all to set up a meeting with the supervisor. We do want to come back out to La Mesa in the near future. So, there's another opportunity there, but I'm happy to coordinate with whoever is the right person to get that on the calendar. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. So seeing no additional requests to speak under public comment, I'm going to close public comments and move on to item 4, which is conflict disclosures. I don't believe that we have any conflict disclosures at this time. So I'm going to move on to item 5, which is current business. 5.1 is the approval of the minutes for the library task force from the meeting dated December 9th, 2021. I hope you've all had the opportunity to review those minutes, and this is your opportunity to let us know if you have any suggestions or changes. If not, we would appreciate a motion and a second to vote on this item.
So move.
I'll second that.
Very good. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Very good. Thank you. So now we're moving on to item 5.2, which is the selection of the chair and vice chair. So at this time, we would entertain a motion to nominate and vote for the position of the library task force chair, and then separately for vice chair.
I am interested in serving as chair of this task force.
Very good. Are there any other nominations for chair? All right, seeing none, I think we should just formally vote on the nomination to have task force member Harris be the chair of the library task force. So I'm going to just take a roll call here. Task force member Chenoweth Moyer.
Sounds terrific.
I'll take that as an aye. Task force member Duggan. I believe you're muted, sir.
Aye.
All right. Task force member Harris.
Aye.
Task force member Moore. Task force member Schmitz,
Aye.
and task force member Wilcox.
Aye.
Very good. So the motion passes. Now we will accept nominations for the vice chair.
I'd be willing to serve.
I would second that.
Okay, very good. It appears we have a nomination and a second for task force member Schmitz to be the vice chair of the library task force. Once again, we'll just do a quick roll call vote. Task force member Chenoweth Moyer.
Aye.
Task force member Duggan was the
Aye.
second. Task force member Harris.
Aye.
Task force member Moore. Task force member Schmitz.
Aye.
I would think so. And task force member Wilcox.
Aye.
All right, very good. So the motion passes unanimously. So just for the record, we have task force member Harris is now Chair Harris, and task force member Schmitz is now Vice Mayor Schmitz. So at this point, what I'd like to do is turn the meeting over to our chair for item 5.3. And you will need to unmute yourself, Chair.
Yes, the first step is to unmute. Well, I wanted to thank the task force for electing me as chair. I hope to be a good facilitator and to bring consensus around the goals of this task force. So look forward to working with all of you. I did want to just mention that I've been involved with the city as a member of some committees that have worked on the climate action plans. So got to know many of the council members that way, and we've been very successful with that effort. And now I'm turning my attention to a whole new project, and I'm really excited about working with all of you. And learning the history of this project, it's really timely that we've come together to renew this effort to bring a state-of-the-art library to our city. So with that, wanted to go to the next item, where we're going to discuss the development of draft recommendations to the city council. And I know Carlos sent out a memo requesting us to send in our recommendations, and wanted to hear what we have gathered from our members.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chair. So what we're going to do is we have taken your recommendations and compiled those into some specific subject matter categories that we think will help to facilitate discussion. My associate senior management analyst, Lynn Dedman, has a presentation that he's going to provide to help facilitate that discussion. You're welcome to ask questions at any time. And so with that, I'd like to turn over the presentation to Mr. Dedman.
Okay, what was the, when did I volunteer for that, or what, the presentation?
Oh, this is a presentation by Lynn Dedman, our senior management analyst.
Okay, because I was good.
Yes, good evening, folks. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, so I'll just go ahead and kick it off. Hope everyone's doing well tonight. As Carlos said, we reached out
Lynn?
to the individual
Lynn?
task force members and asked for recommendations to be sent to us prior to this meeting.
Lynn,
We attempted to categorize the recommendations we received into kind of a make sense approach to really spur discussion to achieve eventually what this group will bring forward, the final recommendations to council. So
Lynn,
yes,
can you turn off the side panel there? There you go.
thank you, John. So I thought it'd be a good idea to start out with our purpose, just to remind us all what we were tasked to do. At the July 27th council meeting, council took action to create the library task force to research options for expanding the La Mesa branch of the San Diego County Library, commensurate to the community's size and needs, and recommend a course of action to the city council. So one of the categories that we created was really the need for an updated facility needs assessment. We know the county had done one in years past, or has done them at the county level to assess their needs. And we received some feedback, recommendations from you folks that really fell into the category of conducting a facility needs assessment to really evaluate the library's operations with respect to things like seating capacity, community room space, areas for children's programs, staff areas, computer space, indoor facilities, and reading areas. We received some feedback that needs assessment should include a community engagement and outreach component, really to involve the community, to include in that scope of work with whatever consultant may be hired, to seek the community's input on what they feel La Mesa needs as far as a library facility. Then this next slide really goes over the potential scenarios and that we received back from the task force. One that's a few of these have been discussed at length in some of our prior meetings, so I think they're gonna be recognizable to all. So I'll just run through them. Consult with the post office regarding its needs and explore opportunities to use additional post office space for the library. The mezzanine has been talked about at length in our past meetings, to explore opportunities to add a mezzanine in the current library building to provide that additional space for community rooms, staff areas, and computer space. Somebody had submitted a recommendation to explore opportunities to add exterior reading space to look outside the building for any kind of opportunities to expand the library outdoors at its current location. And also to look into reconfiguring the existing library floor plan. This wouldn't really add square footage to the library, but it may offer a better opportunity for the library to use better use of space and increase that usable space in some of the key areas that need it. And also to include in the facility needs assessment scope of work, studying cost estimates and the feasibility of building a library offsite. We had one task force member submit what we're kind of categorizing as long-term planning. I don't know if that works or not, but it seemed to fit. And it was really suggested that the city amend an element of our general plan, the public services and facility element, to clearly articulate the relationship between the city and county in providing library services in the city, noting its deficiencies, and also adding a goal of providing adequate library space, and then adopting a clearly stated policy directing the Civic Center subcommittee to include a newer expanded library in the Civic Center master plan, which we have spoken about and discussed in our prior meetings as well. We received some feedback from some of you folks regarding funding and timeline. It really boiled down to directing staff to more broadly explore and identify all of the potential funding sources and mechanisms for funding that may be available today. Some of those bond financing, corporate and philanthropic grants, public and private partnerships, anything that's out there in the year 2021 and beyond that the city could use to help fund a library expansion project. And it was pretty unanimous that this group felt like a 4 to 5 year timeline to complete this project would be ideal. So with that was really what staff received from the task force as far as recommendations. These recommendations are, it's draft language. It's really meant to spur discussion and to get us to some final recommendations that staff can come back to the task force with to at some point finalize. That concludes my presentation. Carlo, I'll give it back to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dedman. So as he stated, our goal here was to collect some initial feedback from you. We've had a couple of meetings. We've received some suggestions as part of those meetings, but then in addition, we really appreciate your contributions and put these in the presentation to try to help guide the conversation. So what I'd like to do at this point is we can go back to any point of the presentation that you wish. If you'd like to see the draft language again and talk about these categories individually to the extent that you have questions and entertain, different, modifications, discussion, et cetera, because we want this to be your plan and your recommendations to the city council. This we feel is a good starting point just based on the initial feedback, but want to hear from you and receive more direction in terms of where to go from here.
Hi, this is Camille. And I didn't notice the part about sending in the recommendations in advance. So I'm sorry, but I had a couple that I wanted to add. And one of them I think is an offshoot of something that was talked about, sort of asking for community engagement relative to the library. And one of the things I have been thinking about the last few weeks is that, I know we've talked a lot about the current location and the post office, and I really wonder if maybe that's not necessarily an ideal location for everyone in La Mesa. It's not particularly central, and I mean maybe that would be something else to focus on, and kind of asking as part of the community engagement what people's preferences about location. another recommendation my teen actually brought up was it might be a really great idea to incorporate a mural or some sort of artwork to commemorate sort of what's gone on in this city for the last few years and everything that's happened. That might be a really neat way to sort of share our community and the diversity and culture within it. So those are my two recommendations, and sorry I didn't send them in advance.
Well, thank you very much for your suggestions. It's okay. We're going to have more opportunities for you to contribute to the overall recommendation. So this is part of a process. So no worries there. And Lynn, it might be instructive if we keep the presentation handy in case we need to reference back to it. So I appreciate you putting that back up.
I've got a couple of comments in regard to the mezzanine addition and the reconfiguration of the existing space in the library. It would be my assumption that a mezzanine addition would probably be a city project because it's a city building. And that reconfiguration of the space would be more a combination of city and county. I mean, the library has done some reconfigurations over the years on a minor scale.
Can everybody see the PowerPoint?
Yes, I can see it. So Vice Chair, if that's a question for staff, what I would offer is that anything that's done to that building or any building in relation to the library would be done in consultation with the county, because we wouldn't want to negatively affect our operations. We want to enhance what we're doing, but the physical, the reconstruction, the bidding, all of that would be a city project because it is a city facility and the county provides the operation. So of course we'd want to consult with them on operations and not do anything that hinders their ability to provide services, but the city would be undertaking the physical work under contract. And Chair, I believe we have a hand raised. Task Force Member Moore may have a comment.
Hi, yeah, I have a couple of comments. It looks like a really good start to the discussion and everything that's included in the slides. So nice contributions by everyone. I was wondering if the city had allocated funding already for a feasibility study. And I was also wondering if the city has a policy about including public art in its building projects as a percentage of the budget.
So good question. So the City Council has not yet provided a budget allocation to do a feasibility study. That could be one of your recommendations to the City Council. Number two, I don't believe the city has a formal policy as described. I know the City Council recently created an Arts and Culture Commission that can look at public art in this way, but I don't believe there's a formal policy that speaks to that.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other thoughts on these recommendations that we want to take forward to the City Council?
I have a comment.
Okay.
Oh.
Go ahead, John.
Go ahead, Bob.
The recommendation I was going to suggest, which I think we need to address, and maybe as far as when Mayor Madrid always knew how to get funds from the county or the state. And I wonder, with all those trillions of dollars coming out of Washington, why we can't be part of the program to get funds for a library, because that would be public improvement. And is there somebody that we approach, whether it's the county, that would actually go to bat for us and try to get those funds from all the money that's coming out of Washington? That's public improvement projects that they want to do.
Well, the city would, as a matter of course, want to be engaged in any kind of request for grant funding, whether it's through a future infrastructure bill that gets approved. We would certainly appreciate the support of the county if they can be a partner there. Recently, we've also worked with Assemblymember Weber's office to receive some state funding for some park projects. So to the extent that those opportunities become available, and we have a project scope so that we have an understanding of cost, our next step in that whole process would be to identify potential sources of funding and then work with the appropriate levels of government to make those requests and to try to identify as much potential funding as we can get for a project. I would backtrack though just a little bit and say that we would need to know what kind of project we're looking at, of course. And so scoping the project would be appropriate, but of course we would want to pursue any and all sources of grant funding that are available.
Okay.
I have a comment.
Member Navarro? Yes.
Yeah, I think your recommendation or your statement there on the needs assessment, I think that you need to hire a consultant to prepare the needs assessment, because that determines the space that you will require. Knowing the space that you will require, you will be able then to establish a good statement of funding. You will know approximately how much it's going to cost you and how much money you're going to need to seek. So that statement there, that we need to do that, that would certainly should be a first step.
It's a really good point. And I know the budget cycle is beginning, or the budget update. So, Carlo, when would we need to get to council to get perhaps an allocation of funding to conduct this needs assessment and hire an expert?
So preferably, we would like to get a request in just for budgetary purposes prior to the end of the fiscal year, which ends on June 30th. I think that would help our finance department in terms of planning for year two, because we have a biannual budget. And this would likely appear as an amendment to year two of our budget. So I would say end of June, no later than that. That would be pushing it. But if we can get it in earlier, just for budgetary purposes, that would be one of my recommendations.
I would actually, I hate to contradict Mr. Tomaino, I would actually bump that up. Being heavily involved in the budget process that I am, I would more like May, April, if we could. Just knowing how the mid-biennium works and the timing with getting those submittals in, it'd be ideal May or April, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, with that in mind, I think it would be great if we could get our recommendations to the council even by late March, the second meeting in March. And then that would give the council some time to think about and discuss it, and then come back in April with, hopefully with some feedback from the council. Does that make sense, Member Schmitz?
My concern is by rushing to get something to them without a well thought out report and recommendation, that we might be giving them. I'm just concerned our product won't look refined enough and well thought out enough.
Good point.
I'd also, and I'll admit I talked to Mr. Tomaino earlier today about the timing of our project, because as we get closer to the election season, my past government experience is things get somewhat warped. And so my personal preference is to keep this out of the next election cycle. And the two options are hurry up and get something in early and maybe not have it look as well thought out, or taking our time and coming back with something a year from now. And be ready for the next budget cycle for the following. Those are my thoughts.
I have a comment, I guess. Let's see. I'm wondering about a two-phase approach here, where planning requests are made now for getting the funding to think about community needs assessment and the work you need to know what you're really looking at for a later request. John, how would you feel about that? And I guess I'm interested in a window on how the city budgets and operates on building projects.
Well, you know, I see this as a number of steps to accomplish the final budgeting process, but the consultant to prepare an updated facility needs is not going to be that expensive. I mean,
Really?
well, I'm an engineer. I've done a number of these over the years, but what you need to do is to establish square footage for the various areas that the library is responsible for, the room space, community room space, children's programs, etc. That's basically what you need, is a square footage determination, not a final design. Based on square footage, you will then be able to establish an overall budget number. You're going to need that before you go to the council. And, you know, why can't we have a step one and go ahead and see if we can get 5,000, 10,000, and see if that will generate some interest to do this from our local engineering staff.
Yeah, I think the engineering component is probably in the second phase, whereas really the needs assessment is what we need to focus on initially. And I like the idea of trying to get the needs assessment into this current budget update, because I think it's a small ask for the city council, and the fact that they formed this task force, they want to get something going. And you know, this will show that the task force is moving forward, making some progress toward a vision and broad recommendations for how to approach the library development project.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if you talk about a mezzanine, you need to know what you're going to put up there to determine whether it's adequate or not adequate. I mean, it's just an overview assessment. It's not a design. A design of a library is something else. We're talking about a needs assessment. That's totally different.
So what I would offer, I have just a couple of clarifying comments, but I do want to recognize, Chair, that we have task force member Chenoweth Moyer. I believe she's got her hand raised. I don't know if you would like to offer some comments.
How do you raise your hands? I don't know how to put a little hand up there.
There's an icon at the bottom of your screen.
Oh, an icon.
And it says raise hand.
Oh, I haven't seen one.
Okay, and I'll recognize member Chenoweth Moyer now.
Thank you. I gotta say, I totally agree with Task Force Member Moore about the two-pronged approach and what we're talking about right now, doing sort of the needs assessment and community engagement piece of this first, because that would then give us a better sense of what's to come. And that just seems like it would would give us sort of more direction and a framework to work with. So thank you.
So real quick, is what we're hearing that sort of all-encompassing facility needs assessment would be the first ask, and then that would help inform the recommendations of where to go based on the findings of the facility needs assessment for step 2 at a later time. That's what I'm hearing. Does that sound right?
Yes, that sounds right.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Member Schmitz?
Yeah, I guess my question to Mr. Navarro is, we had our presentation last month from Ms. Moore, who kind of gave us what the criteria would be from the county system. And I'm guessing, what more do we need from another study? You know, why would we need to go out and hire somebody if the resident expert from the county system has already sort of given us a lot of information?
Well, what is the square footage of the community room? What is the square footage of the computer room? What is the square footage so that we can fit it in the mezzanine, or you can fit it into the postal annex? What is the square footage? Tell me.
Hey, John, maybe I could help answer that. And the way I'm hearing it is that the county assessment was done quite a few years ago, is my understanding. And this would be updating that, but it wouldn't just be studying the current facility. It would be evaluating the cost of building it somewhere else, and then involving the community in trying to determine what they value in a library, and what they would like it to include, and then using that to inform the recommendations of this task force for step 2. Does that sound right? That I'm hearing that? I mean, that's what I'm hearing when we received these recommendations and saw the facility needs assessment in there from some of the task force members. That's how we interpreted it. And also based on what we're hearing at this meeting now.
Well, I'm thinking
Sounds right
that
to me.
I'm thinking that it is not as detailed as you suggested, because, you know, if I just look at the overview of number of residents in La Mesa versus our square footage of the library, 10,000 square footage, you come up with a number. And that number shows that the library is totally inadequate as is. So what would be adequate? Is it 20,000 square feet? Is it 25,000? Is it 30,000?
Those
At
are
this
all good
point-
questions, yes. And that is something that would be worked out through a needs assessment and community engagement process. Going to go to Member Wilcox.
Hey, thanks. I guess my comment is, I just don't want to see us compromise and make all of our plans be about modifying the existing library. The comment that was emailed to us that Joe Glidden sent really spoke to me. You know, when we needed a new fire station, police department, nobody tried to modify what was already existing. It was determined that we needed to do the right thing. And I think this facility needs assessment is important, because I think we need data to show that potentially what we have right now is just not going to be big enough. So I agree that we need to start with determining, you know, through some good data about where we need to go next, and not get blocked into, well, let's just fix what we have and make it work. I don't think we should do that.
Thank you. That's really a insightful comment, and I agree. We at this point in our discussion, we shouldn't be limiting ourselves just to one option. We really want to consider all the options for meeting the future library needs, and developing a plan, a building that will meet and fulfill those needs. I want to go to task member Moore.
I think what I'm hearing from everyone is that the community engagement and outreach piece will help to inform the needs assessment. And from my perspective, that's usually part of one package. So what I'm interested in knowing is that how the city approaches buildings, or do you all have a different approach?
So very good question. So typically, let's say that we're going to redesign or build a new park. We would hire a consultant to prepare what's called a conceptual or initial design, which to Task Force Member Navarro's point, provides an assessment of overall cost, right? So that there's an understanding of, okay, the project is going to be X amount of dollars. Along with that process, what we usually like to see is the consultant engage and lead in and contribute to a community engagement effort where the community is invited to say, okay, well, here's what we want to see in terms of this project. And I think that if you're looking at a recommendation for the council to direct staff to undertake this needs assessment through a consultant, that's something that can be rolled into it so that not only are we conducting the needs assessment, because I think as Task Force Member Wilcox sort of pointed out, we don't know what we don't know right now. And we need to know some things first. And then once we do, and we have community input, then we have some numbers as well to go along with some of that data and that information. And then that's something then that the city council can consider, right? And then going back to your question, Task Force Member Moore, eventually what would happen is that, based on what that needs assessment tells us, what the cost estimates tell us, we can begin to develop a capital project and put that into our CIP. We budget, we program for it. And then, of course, we would have to identify other funding sources, et cetera. So it's a longer process, but I feel like the first step in this process, based on the discussion that's occurred and the recommendations that we've received, is to engage in that needs assessment so that we can assess, collect more information, get some community input, and put something in front of the city council that they can consider with some numbers and some data.
That sounds good. Thank you.
Member Schmitz.
Yeah, I think tying into what Carlo just said, I would envision ideally we would want to do something like the city did for MacArthur Park, that they went out, hired a landscape architect, did conceptual ideas, had community meetings to bounce ideas off of people. Then they go back and they massage their conceptual plans and come back with a few primary considerations. And then wheedle it down, get it down to where they are today. I'd love to do that. I think that should be a recommendation from us. I guess my question would be, that was a lead project for the Community Services Department. Who would, I'm sure Carlo and Lynn don't want to add that to their mound of stuff that they have to do. So would this be something that could be lateral to Community Services, or would some other department take the lead?
That's a good question, Vice Chair. It could be, but ultimately, I think I want to make sure that we're responsible for helping to move the project forward. I certainly don't mind, having that responsibility and contributing to the effort, because I do think that the council has, indicated this is a priority. We want to hear from you. We want to help support you and what you're recommending to them. So one way or another, we will have appropriate staffing to engage a consultant and move this process along. Of course, we'd want to have your contributions as well, to the extent that you're able to volunteer.
Yeah, John, Carlo and I have a lot of experience doing RFPs, requests for proposals, contracts. We're probably the ones that could move this along, maybe even the quickest, unless Carlo disagrees. But we're happy to assist, and it's something we do quite regularly with going out to bid put together scopes of work, that kind of thing.
I guess my question then to Member Navarro is that in line with what you're thinking of? Are you agreeable to something like that?
Yes, yes, definitely. That sounds like it.
Okay, well, I think at this point, we've gotten everyone's input and it seems there's some consensus around going forward to council with recommendations, including hiring a consultant or budgeting some funds for a consultant that can conduct both the needs assessment and community engagement process. And I think perhaps I know I would be willing to work with Lynn on refining these recommendations into some sort of report, and would ask for any other task force members who might be interested in maybe editing or contributing to a report that we could put together for the council, outlining these recommendations and kind of giving our idea of the vision of how this will move forward. How does that sound?
If you're
Yeah,
willing
we
to
need-
absorb
yeah.
that.
Sounds good.
Okay,
Yeah.
and of course, we'll be looking to you, task force member, more because you have a lot of experience in this area.
Sure. We're
You know,
glad.
So I just see us as kind of the editors of it, and then
Glad to-
relying on the more experienced voices to help us craft the message in the report.
Sure.
So Chair Member or Chair Harris, I will take no offense to the fact that you didn't mention working with me. Lynn is your guy. But what?
No, we have assumed that. We have assumed that. We already have you in.
That's
You're in.
right. So, but what we can do for you is between now and the next task force meeting, we can work to develop a draft report. And take these initial draft recommendations, finalize some of that language. We can even circle, the document kind of around, and then put it in front of you again in February. If you'd like to see it again as a task force to make sure that we're going in the right direction, that we have consensus from the group, and then discuss scheduling for city council once we have that in front of us. Does that sound like a plan?
It sounds
Yeah.
great.
Yes.
Yes, terrific.
Very good.
What's this dog showing up from time to time?
That's me. It's my pad. I'm on my iPad and I was moving
Oh.
around. So I put myself on, I'm not showing video.
Well, I came in a little late and I saw the dog and am I in the right place?
Just wanted to check, do we need to make a motion of any kind to record this decision of the task force?
Yeah, preferably if one of you can summarize this into a motion and a vote, that would be great.
I've got a question.
Member Dugan.
Okay, Duggan,
Duggan.
how can we evaluate something that's presently on site, adding on to the, let's say, post office versus a freestanding building, which will cost probably 3 times as much? That's the one thing that'd be hard for me to come up with an assessment of value. We want to come up with a value of what it's going to cost. Well, we're talking about apples and oranges, and the fact that, let's say the ideal thing that the post office moves out in 10 years and we can expand to there. That's going to be a lot less than, let's say, waiting for the city to possibly build a new city hall and hopefully add the library onto that structure. Am I wrong in my assessment in that? I mean, they're two totally different values as far as cost and evaluation.
They are task force member, it's in terms of cost, building something new, it can be more expensive than building something that's there. But something that we can do is in our scope of work for this proposed contract is we can ask the consultant to come up with an order of magnitude cost on a per square foot basis to consider and evaluate those options. I think that, to be fair to the various perspectives of the task force and the council, we'd want to understand that a little bit more. And so we wouldn't know that answer until we have the information in front of us. But typically new construction, it's going to be a little bit more.
What's amazing is that after looking at the beautiful library they have in Alpine versus Lemon Grove and the cost per square foot, the difference between those two structures was unbelievable. And I thought that, nothing against Lemon Grove, but I thought Alpine had a much better layout, floor plan, and it came in less than what the Lemon Grove structure came in. That's just my opinion.
Well, you have to remember that you never come up with the final dollars for the facility until you have a completed design for the library. What we're talking about here is the initial step to establish what we're going to have in there and how big is it. It's not a final design where we're going to go out and hire a contractor to build the library. You're just making an assessment of what we need for a library in La Mesa.
But we
And that's
don't,
square footage.
don't have a location yet.
No, that's right. You don't have a location, but you need to know the square footage requirement for a library in La Mesa. Theoretically, not with the size, the location of the lot, and all these other things. That comes later.
Okay, that's all I wanted to nudge.
Thank you. So what I'm hearing in terms of next steps, and so I'd like somebody to just capture the motion for us, but is for staff to work with our chair in crafting some more or less final recommendations to City Council that will be part of an agenda report that will come back and present at your February meeting for further discussion. And then we will also at that time establish a date for presentation to City Council.
Who would
That
like to
sounds
make a
good.
motion?
I make a motion to proceed with the statements that Carl has made. That sounded good to me.
I'll second.
All
Can
right.
we do, oh, go ahead. Let's take the roll.
Yeah, let's take the roll. Okay, Task Force Member Wilcox.
Aye.
Task Force Member Schmitz or Vice Mayor Schmitz? I'm sorry, Vice Task Force Member Schmitz.
Yeah.
I promoted you there.
Yeah.
Task Force Member Duggan.
Aye.
Task Force Member Moore.
Aye.
Task Force Member Navarro.
Aye.
Task Force Member Chenoweth Moyer.
Aye.
Chair Harris.
Aye.
All right, the motion passes unanimously.
You're a bigger man than I am, Gunga Din.
All right, so Chair, I believe we're ready to move to the next item on the agenda, which is the staff and board member announcements.
Does anyone have any announcements? We'll start with staff.
Staff has no announcements at this time.
Member Schmitz.
Yeah, I think at the last meeting I mentioned that my availability might be influenced by pending surgery. Well, the good news is sort of good. My surgery is scheduled for February 1st, which means I will be under the influence of some heavy drugs for a week or so and pretty immobile for a couple of weeks. But by the time of our next meeting, I should be as coherent as I can be anyway. And if we ever decide to meet in person, I hope to be able to do that without pain.
Good luck, John.
Thanks, Bob.
Are there other member announcements? Okay, what is the date of our next meeting?
Our next meeting is scheduled for February 17th.
Very good. Okay, having concluded the agenda.
Can I
Yes.
ask just a clarification question? So for that 17th meeting, we hope to have a revised set of draft recommendations. Would we also be getting any kind of preliminary information on costs for bringing in a consultant to do the needs assessment? Or is that too early?
It might be too early. We can do some research. We might reach out to Task Force Member Moore to see if she can provide some information on that, just as a ballpark figure, because I think it would be helpful to identify a range of cost for the City Council's consideration. So we'll see what we can find for you as part of that item.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and with that, I think we can adjourn the meeting at 5 p.m. Thank you, everyone. Really good meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.